Hi there, book lovers. Now, rumour has it that spring is on its way. You wouldn't believe it at the moment. It's not very nice out there. Tilly and I got caught in torrential rain this morning. Had to run back to the house. Certainly doesn't feel like spring at the moment, even though the daffodils are all coming out. But it's definitely on the cards. So even though it's not officially here really until well into March, I want to get you in time for gathering together your books for spring reading. So I have gathered together around 8 books that I think are suitable for reading in spring. The question was, what kind of books do you want to read in spring? Now, of course, maybe books that are set in spring or start out in spring, but also spring is a time of regrowth, renewal, hope. And so I thought probably the best books for spring are books that have that feeling of hope in them, and also books about coming of age, books about kind of rebirth, enlightenment. Those were my thoughts in picking this list. As usual, I am going to start with the oldest and work through to the latest book I have. None of them are new releases. They're all books from my bookshelf. I've also suggested a few that are not on my bookshelf that I have read, but for some reason or another don't have copies of. So we've got a lot to get through, and I better get a move on and make a start. I hope you enjoy it. So my first choice, and the oldest book on this list, is Jane Austen. I could have chosen Persuasion because that's another pretty good spring book, I think. I don't actually have a copy, even though I've read all of the Jane Austens. Must have read it as a library book at some point. But I chose one of my favourite Jane Austens, and that is Emma. This is an old 1972 hardback edition. Yeah, there we go, there's the frontispiece. Emma by Jane Austen, first published in 1816. And this particular copy was bought for me by my Auntie Dorothy, my mother's sister, when she was visiting us when we were staying at Stratford in 1972. There you are, she's inscribed it there to Rosamond from Auntie D, Stratford 1972. I think it was the first Jane Austen I ever read, so thank you Auntie Dorothy for introducing me to Jane Austen. We lost Dorothy quite a few years ago now, but we got on pretty well, and she loved books too. So why have I chosen Emma for this spring list? If you haven't read Emma, she appears to us at first as she's very young, but she's rather self-possessed. She believes herself to be very clever. She's a little bit above love and romance, perhaps, but she loves to see love and romance in other people, and she believes herself to be a bit of a matchmaker, having had a little bit of success with that. That is part of the backstory. So she goes about trying to find a match for the young Harriet Smith, who is a young lady of very modest background. But Emma tries to fix her up with somebody a little bit more above her station, and she gets it horribly wrong. And as the book goes on, we see Emma's faults, how she makes mistakes. There is also a young man who comes onto the scene who she believes is trying to woo her, but she gets that horribly wrong too. And she does have the fault of being a little bit patronising, condescending to the people that are of slightly lower class. Very kind, does all the right things, but she's not quite She hasn't quite got it right. And basically the novel is about Emma learning about herself. And if you haven't read it, I don't want to spoil it, so I won't say much more than that. The ending is a surprise to her, let's just say that. And it's rather lovely. So I think Emma is very much a kind of coming of age book. It's a book about finding out about yourself, and where you have tried to, where you think you know better than other people and you find that actually you don't, and you need to find out more about yourself. That for me is what basically Emma is about, and it's a lovely book. I absolutely love it. If you haven't read Jane Austen, I think it's quite a good one to start with, as I did, although I think most people will probably recommend Pride and Prejudice to start with. But any of them are absolutely great. They are wonderful social commentary on the Regency social world by a very witty and intelligent woman. Sad that she died so young and didn't leave us more books, but there you are. For my next book, we come into the Victorian period, and I have chosen Middlemarch by George Eliot. A long time ago that I read this, so you have to forgive me. I do remember enjoying it, but yeah, remembering the plot is not always easy for books I've read some time ago. So I've had to sort of look this up and refresh my memory. Fairly complicated. There are 4 main plot lines, and the main one of which is probably about Dorothea, who again, another highly intelligent Victorian woman who makes mistakes, a little bit like Emma, and she has 2 offers of marriage. The one close to her age she refuses, and she actually marries a reverend and much older man who she believes will help her in her desire to lead an intelligent and sort of bookish life, and that she would like to help him within his intellectual pursuits. But unfortunately, she is much mistaken, and he has no interest in involving her in his intellectual life. Much later on, after his death, she does marry again. There is a lot more to Middlemarch than that, but basically the themes of this novel. Middlemarch is a fictional town set in the Midlands, and the main themes of this novel are marriage, provincial life, and what it's like to be a woman within the social boundaries of the Victorian age. Basically, what is expected of women at that time, and how a woman can achieve the things that she wants to achieve within those boundaries. So George Eliot was making a lot of strong comments about the Victorian age and how it treats women. There's a lot more to it, and that's one of the main themes that I think are of interest to probably a lot of us readers reading it now. George Eliot herself was a highly intelligent woman, way ahead of her time. Her real name was Mariana Evans, and of course she published under a man's name because you were unlikely to get published as a woman at that time. Now, I said the Victorian age, it was written in the Victorian age, but it's actually set in the period leading up to the Reform Act of 1832. So it's actually set before the Victorian age, but it still makes those very, very Victorian themes. And why have I chosen it for spring? Well, there's a lot about provincial life, and there are a lot of countryside scenes, which are very pleasant and make it a lovely reading for a seasonal spring read. My next choice is a classic children's book. Now, unfortunately, I have searched and searched, but I cannot find the lovely copy I had as a child. When I moved into this house a few years ago, a lot of stuff got put away in the garage, and some books and other things have got buried. It might be, I'm hoping it's still around somewhere. One day, if I find it, I will show it to you, because it had the lovely Arthur Rackham illustrations in it, and I've always absolutely loved Arthur Rackham. I also have a copy of Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens with Arthur Rackham illustrations in it, which I will show you one day. But Wind in the Willows, funnily enough, another book that was given to me by my Aunt Dorothy when I was much younger. And I remember the inscription she put in it. It was, I think it was a Happy Christmas, and I hope you love reading the adventures of Ratty and Mole. Love from Auntie Dorothy. And it is a lovely book to read in spring because of the theme of nature and being in nature, and of course it starts in spring. And I love Kenneth Grahame's prose. I think it's so beautiful, and it really conjures up the feelings of the seasons and nature. And some chapters such as the Wild Woods, when Mole gets lost in the woods, and it's very, very scary and dark, and there's all these creatures that he can see their eyes in the darkness, and he was so good at building up that feeling and the emotions. My other favourite chapter, I think, was The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, which is extremely magical and spiritual. But I just wanted to read the first, a little bit from the first chapter, just as Mole has been spring cleaning his house. He's a bit tired of it. Spring was moving in the air above and the earth below, and around him, penetrating even his dark and lowly little house, with its spirit of divine discontent and longing. It was small wonder then that he suddenly flung down his brush on the floor and said, "Bother," and "Oh, below," and also "Hang spring cleaning," and bolted out of the house without even waiting to put on his coat. Something up above was calling him imperiously, and he made for the steep little tunnel which answered in his case to the gravelled carriage drive owned by animals whose residences are nearer to the sun and air. So he scraped and scratched and scrabbled and scrooged, and then he scrooged again and scrabbled and scratched and scraped, working busily with his little paws and muttering to himself, up we go, till at last, pop, his snout came out into the sunlight, and he found himself rolling in the warm grass of a great meadow. "This is fine," he said to himself. "This is better than whitewashing." The sunshine struck hot on his fur, soft breezes caressed his heated brow, and after the seclusion of the cellarage he had lived in so long, the carol of happy birds fell on his dulled hearing almost like a shout. Jumping off all his 4 legs at once in the joy of living and the delight of spring without its cleaning, he pursued his way across the meadow till he reached the hedge on the further side. It's delightful, isn't it? And of course, the other characters, Ratty and of course Badger and Toad, all lovely and funny, and it's just an absolutely delightful children's book, and why not read it as an adult as well? You know, we're allowed to read children's books as adults. particularly classic children's books like The Wind in the Willows deserve to be read well into your old age because they're just very uplifting and joyful. So that's why I've chosen The Wind in the Willows for spring. It starts in spring and it's just full of nature and joy. And it was published in 1908, so we are now into the 20th century. Another book published in 1908 is A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. And some of you may also have seen the film, which was a rather lovely film with Helena Bonham Carter. And again, a little like Middlemarch and, in fact, Emma, it's a book that is very much a commentary on the society of the period and marriage and women in particular. Again, I've chosen it for spring because, again, it's another kind of coming-of-age book. The main character is Lucy Honeychurch. We first see her at the start of the book on holiday in Florence with a cousin and chaperone, where she first meets George, the very boyish and handsome young man, but obviously probably thought to be rather unsuitable for her. She also meets Cecil, who proposes to her twice and she refuses. But he is much more of a desirable match because he's sophisticated, he's wealthy, he has a high rank and a class, and therefore, in the eyes of her family and general society, is much more of a match for her. So when she goes back to England, he proposes again. She accepts Cecil as her fiancé. And as you will imagine, when George comes on the scene again, this causes various complications. So again, it's very much about the expectations of women in this particular era. It seems to be a theme with these particular books I've chosen, and particularly in this book, the expectations of women of a certain class to marry well. Love was not really supposed to have anything to do with it. And of course, there is the theme of Lucy's sexual awakening as well, as she is very confused by her feelings about George. So again, it's chosen for spring because of that kind of the awakening of a young woman and her feelings and what's expected of her and what she actually ultimately wants. It's a great read. It's funny, it's witty, and yeah, Ian Forster is a great writer, and highly recommended. A Room with a View. Come on then. Hey! There she is. There we go. Yeah, you didn't like our walk this morning, did you? We got very wet. She took one look at the rain. We got to the top of the road. She took one look at the rain and said, no, I'm going home. And then we got caught in torrential rain. So she was very wise. Ooh. Now I've left my other glasses somewhere, so I'll have to put these ones on. So my next book is published in 1940, and it's Mariana by Monica Dickens. And you probably know that Monica Dickens was the great-granddaughter of Charles Dickens. And I've read quite a few of her books. I love her writing. And again, it's a little while ago that I read this, so I have had to... I will read from the back for this. Mariana describes a young girl's growth towards maturity in the 1930s. So at the beginning of the book, we see Mary later in life during the war and looking back on her youth between the wars. We see Mary at school in Kensington and on holiday in Somerset. Her love for her cousin Dennis, her attempt to go to drama school, a year in Paris learning dressmaking and getting engaged to the wrong man. So it's a novel about a young girl encountering life. So again, I've chosen it for spring because it's a coming of age. It's about learning about life, learning about the self. And apparently it's pretty autobiographical, very much Monica Dickens talking about her own life. And in fact, if you're interested in Monica Dickens, she wrote a book called One Pair of Feet, which is about her experiences as a nurse. But she wrote several novels. But one of the fun little facts about Monica Dickens that I've always liked is that she said, I can't remember whether it was an autobiography or something I read about her, but she said that she often wondered why she did so many different jobs and went from one job to another and one experience to another. And she said it was when she became a writer that she realised that all that work was all kind of meant, because it gave her the experience with which to write about different things. And I loved that because I so related to it, because I've had a similar experience in my own life. I've had lots of different jobs in my lifetime. And when you become a writer, I mean, I've always been a writer, but I didn't really sort of start seriously writing until late 20s and 30s. And I always thought about that, because I thought, yes, all those jobs I've done, some I've hated, some I've quite liked, but some I wanted to do, like acting, but never got any success. So, when I was being a secretary and just really boring jobs, was all good experience for writing about. So, yeah, me and Monica Dickens have that in common. I always think, yes, that's right, yes. So, yeah, Monica Dickens, great-granddaughter of Charles Dickens. If you've not read her works, then I really do recommend them. See, they're written that they might come across as a little bit dated now, right? Because they're written in the 1940s, but they are very much enjoyable reads. My next book was published in 1987, and it is The Shell Seekers by Rosamund Pilcher. Now, by the cover and the title, you might think this is more of a summer read. Maybe you're right, but I've put it in the spring list because it's very much kind of about rebirth and reawakening. It's about a woman in her 60s. I really ought to read this again. Now I'm in my 60s myself, because when I first read it, I was probably in my 30s. I really, really enjoyed it. I remember that. So yeah, I'd quite like to read this again if I had the time. It's, I think, probably her most popular book. The main character is Penelope Keeling, who at the start of the book is just recovering from a heart attack. And she's kind of reviewing her past and looking back on her life, her marriage. She didn't make a great choice in marriage. She's brought up 3 children. Basically, it goes back and forwards from the present and into the past. And the Shell Seekers of the title is actually the name of a painting painted by her artist father, and is now realised to be worth something of great value. It's difficult to say much about the plot because the book is basically about the characters, it's about family, it's about love, and it's about life, and that realization at a certain age that you need to grab every single minute, live life to the fullest. So that's why I've put it in spring, because it's a kind of reawakening, whereas the other books on my list are about young people. This is about an older person who is kind of rediscovering herself. So yeah, I remember really enjoying this. Rosamund Pilcher is a lot. In fact, I'm actually reading another Rosamund Pilcher at the moment, very, very different, which I'll be reviewing shortly. Yeah, a lovely writer, very heartwarming. Coming into the 21st century now, my next book is from one of my favourite writers, and it's The Forgotten Garden by Kate Morton. I love Kate Morton because she writes usually in different timelines, which I like to do as well. And this one is set in 3 different timelines. First part begins in 1913, then it moves on to the 1970s, and then we come up to 2005. It's about an abandoned child who is found on board a ship. She cannot remember where she came from. She gets adopted and then discovers again that she was abandoned. She was adopted. And she, in the 1970s, as an old woman, she goes on a journey to try and find out more about her origins. And her journey leads her to the coast of Cornwall. And then in the 2005 part, it's her granddaughter, just after Nell's death, who again tries to unravel some of the secrets of her granddaughter. And it's all tied together with a book of fairy tales written by a Victorian authoress called Eliza, who also, there's a bit of a mystery around here because she disappeared mysteriously in the early 20th century. So it's very much a book of mysteries, of trying to find out of where you come from. Cassandra, in the more modern part of the book, Cassandra, the granddaughter, going on this journey of discovery, she also finds out more about herself. So it's very much a book about self-discovery. I think that's why it's a good spring book, because it has that theme of new beginnings, discovery about the self, and it's about a garden. And there's a lovely passage. A stone path led beneath an arbour of ancient roses with arthritic joints. The temperature cooled as they crossed the garden's threshold. The overall impression was one of darkness and gloom, and quiet, an odd, still quiet. Even the noise of the irrepressible sea seemed dulled in here. It was as if the grounds within the stone wall were asleep, waiting for something or someone to wake them. So that very much conjures up that feeling of the sort of the end of winter and waiting for something to happen, for something to awaken. So yeah, a good spring book, I think. And I love Kate Morton anyway. Any of her books I highly recommend for if you like books set in different timelines. They're often about houses and gardens and self-discovery. My next book was published in 2011, and it's The Language of Flowers, Vanessa Diffenbauer. She is an American writer, and this, again, it's a book, I suppose, mainly about self-discovery, and also, again, the main character was abandoned as a child and brought up in foster homes. So she has a very difficult childhood, which informs her character. She has many flaws, but I think her and other characters, the book is very much about how one's upbringing can affect one's behaviour and perception of life. And one of her foster parents teaches her about the Victorian language of flowers, which she becomes quite interested in and almost obsessed by. So later on, when she starts working as a florist, she uses this information, sells people flowers based on what communication they want to make with those flowers, and uses the language of flowers to put together bouquets for people, and more and more people start to come to the florist. But the difficulty arises when she meets somebody from her past and they become involved, and difficulties arise from that. I won't go too much further. It is difficult in parts because she has this difficult upbringing, but it's also a journey of human nature, self-discovery and redemption. As it says on the front, anyone can grow into something beautiful. And intertwined throughout the novel is the language of flowers, which comes up time and time again. And in fact, she writes a dictionary of flowers herself. And at the back of the novel, she actually, the writer has put Victoria's Dictionary of Flowers, which is from, if you've ever looked into the Victorian language of flowers, it's quite fascinating. So that's got a nice little extra there. So yeah, I enjoyed this book. It's not my favourite book in the world. I think it's one of my mother's books. This was obviously a subject that appealed to her, but it is a good read. And if you are interested in books about people overcoming past experiences, redemption, and also books about flowers, you might like this. That's my main list, and I've got a little bonus because I think 2 more books should be added to this list, and they're both, I suppose you might think of children's or young people's books. And one of them is Anne of Green Gables. Now, I haven't put it on my list because I haven't got a copy. I haven't actually, to be honest, even read it. But I did see the recent television series, which was lovely. It's a lovely story. And again, a story of a child, an adopted child growing into adulthood. So a nice spring theme. And the other one, of course, is The Secret Garden, a favourite of many people. I didn't read it till much later in life, and of course it's got that lovely garden theme in it. And again, another one of difficult childhood and discovering life. So those are 2 little bonus recommendations from me. So there we go. By the way, I forgot to mention at the beginning, thank you very, very much for all your birthday wishes. And it was really nice to hear that from people. I had a nice day. If you want to know, I had lunch with my brother and sister-in-law. For the rest of the day, I watched Lord of the Rings again. It's a bit of a tradition of Christmas and birthdays every 2 or 3 years. So there you are, a little glimpse into my little life. So anyhow, I hope spring will be here soon. I'm fed up of all this rain. Anyway, I shall be doing another book review soon. Hope you enjoyed my list. And for more talks about books, reviews, and all kinds of things about authors and books and book genres, etc., please do subscribe. And I will look forward to seeing you again very shortly. Bye for now.